In a quiet church nestled in the heart of Lagos, Nigeria, a fiery sermon echoed through the pews on a humid Sunday morning. The preacher was not just any man of God. He was a respected voice known for his ability to blend scripture with the realities of African geopolitics. But this time, his message was different. It stirred something deeper. It sent shockwaves across the congregation and eventually across social media. The reason? A subtle yet powerful reference to one name, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. This is the story of a sermon that awakened the continent. Let us take you inside the walls of that church, between the verses and the pauses, into the heart of the message that touched millions. Was it a coded endorsement? A spiritual prophecy? Or a warning to those who still underestimate the power of Africa's rising suns? Pastor Nathaniel O. Adigboy, known simply as Pastor Nat, is a towering figure among contemporary Nigerian evangelicals. With over 2 million followers across platforms and a reputation for confronting uncomfortable truths, his words carry weight far beyond the pulpit. But this sermon, delivered on what was supposed to be a regular Sunday service, broke the mold. He began with the book of Judges, chapter 6, the story of Gideon. And the Lord said unto him, Surely I will be with thee, and thou shalt smite the Midianites as one man. He paused. He looked across the crowd. Then with fire in his voice, he said, God is raising warriors again, not perfect men, not privileged men, but prepared men, like Gideon, like David, like Traoré. A few in the crowd stirred. Yes, he repeated, Traoré. A murmur rippled through the audience. This was no accident. It was deliberate, and it was only the beginning. Pastor Nat spoke for over an hour, weaving biblical principles into Africa's unfolding story. He talked of betrayal, of colonial curses, of leaders who fed on their people like wolves, and then, like clockwork, he would return to one man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He reminds me of Moses, he said, a man who fled into the wilderness but returned with fire. He spoke of courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet bravery it takes to stand against empires. He warned that the time of pharaohs is ending and a new generation of deliverers is rising. Traoré is not a saint, he said, but neither was David, neither was Paul, and yet God used them because they were willing. And the congregation erupted. This was no longer a sermon. It was a proclamation. Clips of the sermon went viral within hours, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitter, everywhere. Some called him brave. Others accused him of politicizing the gospel. But one thing was clear. The people were listening. Comment sections were flooded. Finally, a pastor who gets it. We need more voices like this. Traoré is God's instrument. The Nigerian Broadcasting Commission quietly flagged the clip for review. That only added fuel to the fire. Across the continent, pastors, imams, and traditional priests debated what this meant. Was it prophecy? Was it politics? Or was it both? To understand the weight of Pastor Nat's words, you must look back. Kwame Nkrumah spoke of spiritual revolution before political change. Thomas Sankara invoked scripture in his fiery speeches. Even Nelson Mandela, though secular, acknowledged the divine order behind Africa's liberation. But this was different. This wasn't just reflection. It was direction. He compared Traoré to biblical warriors. He claimed Burkina Faso's struggle mirrored Israel's fight against Egypt. He invoked Daniel, who stood before Babylon's kings. And he warned the modern-day pharaohs, the imperial powers, the IMF, the puppet leaders, that their days are numbered. The spirit of Africa is awakening, he thundered, and it will not be silenced. Midway through the sermon, Pastor Nat dropped his most controversial line. If Jesus were here, he wouldn't be in a palace. He would be in Ouagadougou, walking beside Traoré. Gasps. He clarified, not because Traoré is perfect, but because he fights for the poor. Some elders left the building. But the youth, they stood. They cheered. Some wept. In the days that followed, the church received hundreds of emails. Some from Nigerian youth, some from Burkinabè exiles, some from Ghana, South Africa, Senegal. Many simply read, "Thank you." One message stood out. I haven't believed in God for years, but that sermon, that message, reminded me why I should. While no official comment came from the president's office in Burkina Faso, an aide speaking anonymously told a reporter, "We saw the sermon. The captain was moved." That was all. But it was enough. So what was the hidden message of the sermon? Here's what many believe. Endorsement without endorsing. By drawing biblical parallels, Pastor Nat gave moral legitimacy to Traoré without being overtly political. Call to action. He wasn't just praising a man. He was calling a generation to rise. Spiritual warfare. He implied that Africa's battle is not just political, but spiritual, and leaders like Traoré are part of that divine movement. Signal to the elite. To politicians, church leaders, and foreign agents, the tide is turning. The final minutes of the sermon were electric. Pastor Nat raised his hand and declared, "I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know that this continent will not be the same. And when our children ask who stood when the giants walked, let them say, 'We did.'" He then led the congregation in prayer for the leaders of Africa, for those who dare, for those who fall and rise again, and for Captain Traoré. A collective amen roared across the church. Sometimes revolutions begin with a bullet, other times with a sermon. This was one of those times. And somewhere, perhaps in the quiet of night, Traoré may have watched that clip. Perhaps he smiled. Perhaps he wept, or perhaps he simply whispered, "The legacy continues."